My sister was given everything growing up: new cars, private school, the whole package. Then at Thanksgiving she learned I had $30 million and completely melted down in front of everyone. My aunt started screaming and my dad just... Growing up, I figured out pretty early that in my family, love always seemed to come with strings attached. My sister Lily arrived first, and from the second she was born, she slipped right into the role of the golden child. I showed up 3 years later, supposedly an accident, something my mom brought up more than once whenever she fought with my dad. The gap in the way we were treated wasn't subtle at all. It was loud, constant, and shaped nearly every moment of my childhood. Lily got sent to Westlake Academy, this fancy private school with tuition higher than most people's yearly income. I ended up at Roosevelt Public High, where the ceiling tiles were stained from leaks and the textbooks looked like they belonged in a museum. When Lily hit 16, Dad handed her the keys to a brand new pearl white BMW 3 Series. I got a bus pass and my mom's beat-up 1998 Honda Civic that barely made it through a month without sputtering out on the side of the road. Her entire education at Stanford was fully covered, while I worked 3 different jobs just to scrape together enough for community college before transferring to a state school using scholarships I fought hard to earn. The justifications were always the same lines. Lily needs to focus on school. Your sister has real potential. We're investing in Lily's future. What they really meant was simple. Lily was the one worth pouring money into and I wasn't. My parents, Mark and Elaine, made their priorities painfully obvious. Dad owned a modestly successful accounting firm, and Mom sold real estate. They had plenty of money. They just funneled it all into one daughter. By the time I was about 12, I'd stopped asking for anything. Lily got a European vacation for her high school graduation. When I asked for help with college applications, I was told to figure it out alone. She received a monthly allowance that was more than I earned stocking shelves at the grocery store on weekends. Her closet overflowed with brand-name outfits while I hunted through thrift stores and taught myself how to tailor clothes so they actually fit. Christmas mornings were their own kind of punishment. Lily tore through present after present, while I got maybe 1 or 2 practical things, a pair of socks or a sweater from a bargain store. But honestly, the worst part wasn't the stuff. It was watching my parents' faces light up like a Christmas tree when Lily entered the room, only to dim a little when their eyes landed on me. It was hearing Dad gush to coworkers about Lily's achievements, then introduce me with this half-hearted, "This is my other daughter, Rachel." It was Mom posting endless photos of Lily online while barely having a handful of old snapshots of me. I eventually developed this habit of fading into the background. I stayed in my room, buried myself in schoolwork and mapped out my escape plan. Lily lived for attention and praise, constantly fishing for reassurance that she was exceptional. If she didn't get her way, she'd throw full-blown tantrums, and my parents would twist themselves into knots to satisfy her. Meanwhile, I learned to depend on myself. I learned the hard way that counting on others only set me up for disappointment. After high school, I moved out the moment I could. I worked full-time while juggling college classes, rented a cramped studio apartment with shaky heating, and survived mostly on cheap ramen and whatever groceries were on clearance. My parents didn't offer to help and I didn't bother asking. Lily, on the other hand, lived in a plush apartment near Stanford that Dad covered completely, along with a generous monthly stipend. She filled her Instagram with weekend trips to wine country, while I picked up extra shifts during holiday breaks. I eventually graduated with a degree in computer science and a minor in math. I realized I had a real knack for programming and problem solving, and more importantly, I found something that felt entirely mine. I landed a job at a tech startup in Austin, Texas, far from my family in the suburbs of Connecticut. The starting salary wasn't anything glamorous, but the company offered equity to early hires. I kept my expenses low, saved as much as I could, and dove into learning about investing. The startup was called Vertex Solutions, and we were building machine learning inventory software that predicted supply chain needs. I was one of the first 12 employees, starting as a junior developer, but I picked things up fast. The founders, 2 former Amazon engineers named Tom and Valerie, recognized potential in me that my own parents never seemed to notice. Within the first year, they promoted me twice, eventually trusting me to lead development on our main product. Austin became my safe place. I made real friends, people who didn't know anything about the messy dynamics I grew up with. To them, I was just Rachel, the programmer who loved tacos and wasn't afraid to butcher a song on karaoke night. I dated casually here and there, though trust never came easy, probably thanks to years of conditional affection. My therapist, Dr. Reynolds, helped me unpack a lot of the emotional baggage I'd carried around since childhood. During those years, I'd call home maybe every couple of months. The conversations followed the same script every time. Mom would spend a few minutes asking surface-level questions about my life before jumping straight into half an hour of updates about Lily's latest achievements. Dad would hop on the line just long enough to awkwardly ask about my tech job, sounding like he didn't understand or care what I actually did. Lily never asked to talk to me, and I never requested her either. One call in particular still stings when I think about it. It was during my second year in Austin, right after I'd been promoted to lead developer, a huge step for me along with a major raise. I was genuinely proud, and a small part of me still hoped my parents might be proud too. When I told my mother, she replied with a quick, "Oh, that's nice, sweetheart," and immediately shifted into telling me that Lily had just been featured in a local newspaper article about rising young entrepreneurs. The article painted her flop of a jewelry venture as some brave tale about embracing risk, and my mom read the whole thing to me over the phone, her voice practically glowing with pride. When I hung up, I broke down for the first time in years, not because any of it shocked me, but because I'd let myself believe even for a second that maybe things could finally be different. In my next session, Dr. Lawson helped me see that I kept going back to a well that had been bone dry my entire life. That realization became a turning point for me. I stopped trying to share my successes with them, and I stopped holding out for validation they were never going to give. Meanwhile, the company just kept expanding. Our team grew from a dozen people to 50, then to over 100. With every funding round, the value of my equity climbed higher, even if it still existed mostly on paper. I lived simply, sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with my roommate, Jessica, who worked in nonprofit advocacy. We'd stay up late talking about what we wanted out of life, her dreaming of changing the criminal justice system, and me imagining creating a tech company that actually helped people. All the while, Lily's life stayed as unpredictable as ever. Aunt Diane, who had always been my main connection to family news, kept me updated on Lily's carousel of wealthy boyfriends, each breakup somehow more dramatic than the last. There was the investment banker who dumped her after she maxed out the emergency credit card he'd given her, the developer who discovered she'd been faking having a job, and the trust fund guy who finally saw past the image she curated. Every time things blew up, she moved home, drained more support from my parents, and bounced into her next attempt at reinvention. My parents fueled all of it. They paid for a life coaching certification she never used. They funded her shot at becoming a personal stylist, which barely lasted a season. They covered the costs when she started a master's program in communications, only for her to quit after one semester because the coursework felt too demanding. The money just kept flowing from their pockets to hers, propping up a lifestyle she couldn't sustain and reinforcing every habit that kept her dependent. After graduating from Stanford, Lily moved back home again. She said she couldn't find a job worthy of her, which basically meant she didn't want anything that required real work. My parents supported her entirely, never once pushing her to stand on her own. She drifted from idea to idea, a short-lived stab at influencing, the jewelry line that Dad bankrolled and that fizzled instantly, a vague attempt at consulting that never produced anything. Meanwhile, I was grinding through 70-hour weeks, soaking up everything I could, and slowly building a career. The startup surged ahead, transforming inventory management for online retailers to the point where major companies, Target, Wayfair, and several top fashion brands, were depending on our system. We process billions in inventory data, and the algorithms I'd helped develop saved businesses millions by cutting waste and improving storage efficiency. As the funding rounds continued, my equity, still untouched, grew more and more valuable. During our Series B, a bunch of coworkers sold portions of their shares. I thought about doing the same. The payout would have changed my entire life, probably around $200,000 at the time. But something told me to hold tight. Tom and Valerie believed we were building something rare, and I trusted their instincts completely. When Series C wrapped up, we brought in even more capital, and the company's valuation soared into the hundreds of millions. Suddenly, Vertex Solutions was getting mentioned as one of the hottest B2B supply chain tech companies around. Recruiters started filling my inbox with offers from big-name corporations trying to lure me away with impressive salaries. But I stayed. Part of it was loyalty, and part of it was the fact that Vertex felt like the closest thing I'd ever had to a real family, one that actually valued me. Then came the acquisition rumors. A major Fortune 500 company specializing in enterprise software had been eyeing us for a while, wanting our tech folded into their huge platform, and they were willing to pay big to make it happen. Negotiations dragged on for months. I wasn't part of those talks, but the whole office felt different. Quiet conversations behind meeting room doors, the founders holding all-hands meetings where they couldn't say much, yet somehow said everything. The day the deal became official, I was in a meeting when Tom and Valerie called everyone to gather. They looked exhausted but thrilled. When they revealed the numbers, people actually gasped. For them, it was a monumental exit. For early employees like me, it was the kind of payout that required a financial advisor just to wrap your head around. The actual closing took another 6 weeks while lawyers and regulators did their part. During that stretch, I kept trying to make sense of what it would mean for me. My financial advisor, whom I'd hired specifically for this moment, ran the projections over and over. With my equity, the vesting schedule, and the sale price, I was set to receive somewhere between $28 and $32 million after taxes. The night the wire finally hit my account, I sat alone in my living room at 2 a.m, staring at my banking app for the 15th time just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. The number sat there clear as day, $30,247,812. I'd gone from someone who used to panic over grocery money to someone who would never have to worry about finances again. I called Jessica into my room, and she knew exactly what was happening. We just stood there staring at my phone screen in silence, both of us stunned. I didn't tell anyone else. For months, I let the money sit untouched while I tried to wrap my head around what my life had suddenly become. I kept working because the acquiring company wanted to retain the original team, and honestly, I enjoyed what I did. I'd built a life in Austin that felt solid, good friends, a comfortable apartment downtown, and hobbies I'd grown into. The money felt unreal, like something that might disappear if I acknowledged it too directly. Eventually, I began making changes, but only small, practical ones. I bought a gorgeous house tucked into the hills overlooking the lake. I hired a financial advisor and an attorney to help me manage everything responsibly. I set up trusts and charitable funds. I diversified into index funds and real estate. I made sure my future was secure and that I could contribute to causes I genuinely cared about. But on the surface, I stayed the same. I drove an ordinary car, wore everyday clothes, and never flaunted anything. People at work knew I'd done well in the acquisition, but the real numbers stayed private. By then, my relationship with my family had dwindled to almost nothing. I'd call my parents on holidays, visit once a year for a day or two, and keep things polite and shallow. Lily and I barely spoke. She'd usually text asking for help or money, and I'd decline gently. My parents didn't seem bothered. They were too wrapped up in managing Lily's endless crises. She bounced from failed relationships to impulsive choices, burning through money faster than they could hand it over, always in some kind of turmoil that required their immediate attention. Then one day, out of nowhere, came an invitation to Thanksgiving. My mother actually called me, which was surprising since we usually communicated through short texts, and she insisted that I come home for the holiday. She mentioned that Aunt Diane would be there with her family, along with Uncle Jim and his wife, Sarah. It would be a full family gathering for the first time in years. Something about her tone made me pause, but eventually I agreed. It had been nearly 2 years, and despite everything, some tiny part of me still wanted to feel connected to them. I flew into Hartford and rented a car. Instead of staying at my parents' house, I booked a hotel, telling them I had work calls that might disturb everyone. In reality, I couldn't handle sleeping under their roof again. Especially not in my old bedroom that was probably being used to store all of Lily's extra belongings. When I pulled into the driveway on Thanksgiving morning, the sight of their colonial-style house stirred up a mess of emotions. Lily's new Audi sat front and center, a birthday present for her 28th. She'd totaled the BMW years ago, and naturally, it had been replaced without question. Inside, the air smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. My mom greeted me with a stiff hug, immediately pointing out that I looked tired and asking whether I was taking care of myself. Lily appeared from the living room, dressed head to toe in designer clothes with hair clearly done by a professional. She gave me a slow once-over, taking in my simple jeans and sweater. Rachel, wow, you actually came. Still living in Texas? She said it like Texas was some forgotten wasteland. Yep, still in Austin. I love it there, I replied evenly. That's cute. Some people are just made for simpler lives, she said with this sugary, condescending smile. I'm actually about to close on a condo in Manhattan. Dad's helping with the down payment, but it's mostly my investment. I've been consulting for some major fashion brand, so the income is finally where it needs to be. I knew that wasn't remotely true. My mom had told me during a short call that Lily was unemployed again and living off them. I just nodded and walked past her into the kitchen, where my mom was rushing around with dishes. Soon Aunt Diane arrived with her husband Tom and their kids, followed by Uncle Jim and Aunt Sarah. The house filled with noise and chatter, kids running around, people catching up. At one point, Diane pulled me aside, asking about my life with genuine curiosity. She'd always treated me more kindly than my own parents, though she never openly challenged them about their favoritism. You look great, Rachel. Seriously. There's something different about you, she said, studying me closely. I'm happy. Things are really good. It was the most honest thing I'd said all day. Dinner was the usual extravagant production. My mom had gone overboard. Multiple courses, pricey wine, a table set up straight out of a magazine. Dad sat at the head of the table with Lily next to him in the place of honor. I ended up between Uncle Jim and one of Diane's teenagers. Conversation swirled around me. Politics, work updates, family news. Lily commanded the room as always. She talked endlessly about her Manhattan condo plans, describing the neighborhood and the lavish furniture she wanted. She casually dropped designer names like she was reading from a script. Dad couldn't stop smiling at her, chiming in about what a wise investment it was and how proud he was. Lily's always had such refined taste, Mom added as she topped off wine glasses. She just knows quality. That's why we made sure she had the right education and support. And look, it's paying off. The comparison hung in the air like a fog. Lily caught my eye and smirked, fully aware of the implication. I just focused on my plate, silently counting down the minutes until I could leave. Then Diane asked the one question that shifted everything. So, Rachel, how's your career going? Still with that tech company? Actually, I said, keeping my tone casual, we were acquired earlier this year. It's been an adjustment, but honestly a good one, I said, keeping things as vague as possible and hoping the topic would drift away. Acquired? What does that even mean? Diane leaned in, actually curious. A bigger company bought us, I explained. Happens a lot in tech. I took a slow sip of water, trying to signal that this didn't need to become a centerpiece conversation, but Uncle Jim wasn't letting it go. Hold on, you were with a startup, right? Did you have equity? There wasn't a graceful escape from that. Yes. Early employees got stock options that paid out after the acquisition. Jim, being a financial consultant, understood exactly what that meant. That must have been a pretty major payout. Those early startup shares can be worth a fortune. The whole table went silent. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Lily's smile stiffened like plastic. My dad stared at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. It worked out well, I said lightly, trying to soften it, but the moment was already past saving. How well? Lily's voice had a sharpness to it. Like what, $100 grand? I could have lied, could have brushed it off, but something in her voice, that automatic assumption that whatever I did would always be beneath her, made me stop. I was exhausted from being invisible, exhausted from being treated like the lesser daughter, exhausted from hiding my success so the family dynamic stayed comfortable. I met her stare head on. Like $500,000? She barked out a laugh, convinced that was the highest number I could possibly reach. More? $1 million? Now my dad jumped in, voice tight. You made $1 million? More than that, Dad. The room seemed to lose all its oxygen. Diane's eyes were huge. Jim was nodding, clearly doing mental math. My mom was frozen mid-scoop with a serving spoon in her hand. Lily had gone ghost white. How much more? I felt the weight of every slight, every ignored achievement, every time Lily was celebrated for doing nothing while what I accomplished never mattered. Something inside me, some last bit of restraint, just broke loose. The acquisition was massive. Early employee equity turned into real money. After taxes and everything, I cleared just over $30 million. The silence hit like a shock wave. Then chaos erupted. Lily shot to her feet so fast her chair slammed onto the floor behind her. Her face flipped from white to beet red, her hands trembling. You're lying. You're actually lying. There's no way, absolutely no way you made that kind of money. Lily, watch your language. My mom scolded automatically, even in her shock. Language? Language? Lily shrieked. She just claimed she has $30 million and you're worried about my language? My dad stood too, looking shaken. Rachel, is that true? You have 30 million? Yes, Dad. Give or take a few million depending on market fluctuations. Lily started pacing, grabbing fistfuls of her hair. Oh my God. Oh my God. This isn't happening. She's making it up. She has to be. I'm not making anything up, I said evenly. I can show documentation if it matters, but I honestly don't care whether you believe me. My calm tone made Lily even more unhinged. Documentation? Documentation? She snatched her wine glass, and for a second I thought she might fling it. Do you have any idea what I could do with that kind of money? Do you have any idea what that would mean for me? And it went to you? You? The girl who wore thrift store clothes and drove that piece of junk car? Lily, that's enough, Diane said sharply, standing up. You're throwing a tantrum over someone else's success. Listen to yourself. But Lily was gone, swallowed by years of entitlement and jealousy. She doesn't deserve it. She never deserved anything. I'm the one who went to Stanford. I'm the one who had potential. She went to some no-name state school and worked for some random startup. This isn't fair. Fair. I repeated, the word coming out harder than I meant. You want to talk about fair? You got a BMW at 16. I got a bus pass. You got Stanford paid in full. I worked 3 jobs and took out loans. You lived in a luxury apartment with a stipend. I lived on ramen and prayed my heater wouldn't die. Everything was handed to you, and now you're screaming about fairness because I actually earned something? My mom burst into tears. Rachel, sweetheart, we didn't know, we never imagined. You never imagined I'd ever amount to anything, I said plainly. Yes, Mom, I know. You made that pretty clear growing up. The words came faster, years of hurt cracking open. Every choice you made told me I wasn't worth investing in. Every time you bragged about Lily and ignored me. Every time she got something expensive and I got nothing. Every birthday you forgot. Every moment you made sure she was the star. I always knew exactly where I stood. We were just trying to give Lily the support she needed, Dad said weakly. She needed more help. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Or she was easier to love. Let's call it what it was. You chose one daughter and left the other to figure life out alone. And honestly, fine. I'm grateful now. I learned to survive on my own. I learned how to work, how to push myself, how to rely on nobody but me. And that's how I built something real. Lily collapsed into her chair, full dramatic sobbing. This is a nightmare. A literal nightmare. She can't have that much money. Tell me she's lying. Tell me it's impossible. Aunt Sarah went to comfort my mom while Uncle Jim stared at the scene like he'd stumbled into a play he hadn't auditioned for. Patricia's teenage daughter had been filming the whole meltdown on her phone, until Patricia quietly told her to put it away. The scene was a complete disaster, but strangely, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth was finally out in the open. How long have you had this money? Dad asked, his voice sounding hollow. About 9 months, I replied. He sank back into his chair. You've been sitting on $30 million for 9 months and didn't tell us? Why would I asked, keeping my tone even. So Lily could come asking me to bankroll her lifestyle? So you two could suddenly decide I mattered now that I was wealthy? I didn't tell you because you barely have a relationship with me because you made it that way. Nothing about how you treated me changed just because my bank account did. That's not fair. My mom sobbed openly now. We love you, Rachel. We've always loved you. You love me. The words came out quieter than I meant. When exactly was that, Mom? When you missed my high school graduation because Lily had a dentist appointment. When you brushed off my Dean's List honors as a phase to Aunt Diane. When you sent Lily to Europe and told me I should be grateful for scraps. When did that love ever show itself? She had no answer. We both knew why. Suddenly Lily lunged at me across the table. Patricia and Tom grabbed her before she could reach me, but she was thrashing and screaming like she'd come undone. I hate you. I've always hated you. You were supposed to be nothing. You were supposed to stay nothing. This was supposed to be my life. Mine. Lily, for God's sake, Patricia said, struggling to restrain her. Get a grip. Let her go, I said quietly. She's not going to hurt me. She's just finally realizing that being spoon-fed everything her entire life didn't actually prepare her for reality. That's not on me, that's on you too. I looked directly at my parents. You did this. You raised her to be so entitled and fragile that someone else's success feels like a personal attack. My dad's face crumpled, and suddenly he looked much older than 62. We made mistakes, he murmured. We see that now. But Rachel, you have to understand. I don't have to understand anything. I cut in. I spent my whole childhood trying to understand why I wasn't enough for you. Why I didn't deserve the same investment or love you poured into Lily. I'm done trying. I'm done hoping things could ever change. Tonight just confirmed what I already knew. This family is toxic, and I'm better off without it. I stood up, folding my napkin and placing it beside my plate. Lily had stopped fighting and was now just sobbing loudly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Mom kept shaking her head like she could somehow undo the moment. Dad stared at the table, unable to look at me. Rachel, please don't go, Aunt Diane said softly. I know this is terrible, but I'm not upset with you, Diane. You've always been kind. But I can't stay. This whole thing was a mistake. I grabbed my purse. For what it's worth, I'm doing well. I'm happy. I have good friends, a career I love, and yes, financial stability. I built a life for myself without the help of the people who were supposed to support me. I don't need your approval anymore. I stopped needing it a long time ago. I turned toward the door, but my mother's voice stopped me. What do we do now? How do we fix this? I looked back at her. She seemed small, devastated, finally realizing what decades of choices had created. You can't fix this, I said. This isn't something an apology or a heart-to-heart will magically repair. You built this family dynamic one decision at a time. Lily's meltdown isn't the problem. It's the symptom. The problem is that you taught her she was worth more than me. And now she can't handle a reality where that's not true. And you spent my entire childhood showing me I didn't matter. And now you're shocked I built a life that doesn't include you. Dad's voice cracked. We can change. We can try to do better. Maybe you can, I said. But I'm not interested. I needed parents who showed up when I was 12, 15, 18. I needed support when I was working multiple jobs to buy textbooks. I needed you to believe in me even once the way you believed in Lily every day. That time is gone. I became who I am in spite of you, not because of you, and I'm proud of that. But it also means there's nothing here worth salvaging. Lily had stopped crying, staring at me with red, swollen eyes. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of realization, maybe even clarity, but it vanished, smothered by bitterness. I walked out into the cold November air. Behind me, shouting and sobbing reignited, but I didn't look back. I got in my rental car and drove away from that house, that family, that entire lifetime of hurt. Back at the hotel, the room was quiet and warm. I ordered room service, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat by the window watching the city lights. My phone vibrated nonstop. Texts from my mom, missed calls from my dad, and a barrage of frantic messages from Lily, swinging wildly between apologies, threats, and pleas. I set my phone to silent. Diane texted me once. I'm so sorry you had to grow up like that. I should have said something. You deserved better. I'm proud of you. I wrote back thanking her and told her I wasn't cutting her off. Just my immediate family. She deserved to know that. The next morning I changed my flight and headed back to Austin early. As the plane lifted off, I felt a weight slide off my shoulders. The truth was out. The confrontation was done. And I was free from chasing love from people who'd never known how to give it, free from the constant comparisons, free from always feeling like I came in second. I finally felt like my life was truly my own, free from the hope that someday things might magically change. 3 weeks later, a certified letter showed up from my parents. It was long and rambling, full of apologies and attempts to explain their decisions, wrapped in regret. They said they wanted to make amends, to be part of my life again, to start fresh. According to the letter, Lily had completely unraveled after Thanksgiving and was now in therapy. They were seeing a therapist too, trying to understand how they'd gone so wrong. I read the letter twice, then tucked it away. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe one day I'd be open to rebuilding something. But not now. Not this year. Maybe not ever. The money hadn't changed things the way they imagined. It hadn't made me happier. I'd already built a good life before any of that happened. What it did was give me the freedom to walk away without fear or guilt. I didn't need anything from them anymore. Not their approval, not their support, not their presence. Financial independence meant I could shut that door completely without wondering if I'd regret it later. About 6 months later, Lily emailed me. It was unexpectedly honest. She wrote from rehab, where she was being treated for substance abuse and what her therapist called golden child syndrome. She apologized for everything, admitted she'd been raised to see me as inferior, and said she was trying to become a better version of herself. She didn't ask for money or help, which was a big step for her. She just wanted me to know she was sorry. I replied briefly, wished her well in her recovery, but made it clear I had no interest in rebuilding any kind of sisterly bond. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. The foundation was too cracked to support anything new. My parents kept trying for a while. They sent birthday cards with checks I mailed back, Christmas gifts I donated, invitations to holidays that I declined politely. Eventually their attempts slowed down. We settled into a distant, polite rhythm. They became more like acquaintances who just happened to be related to me. A year and a half after that Thanksgiving blow-up, I was sitting in my home office when Aunt Diane called. My dad had suffered a heart attack. He was stable, but he'd asked to see me. She wasn't pushing me, just relaying the message. I told her I'd think about it. I did end up visiting him in the hospital. He looked small and frightened, nothing like the man who used to look right past me while doting on Lily. He cried as he apologized again, saying he'd spent the past 18 months replaying all his regrets and that I topped the list. He wanted another chance. I told him I forgave him, and I truly meant it, but it wasn't for his sake. It was for mine. I didn't want to carry the anger anymore. But forgiveness isn't the same thing as reconciliation. I wished him a full recovery, told him I was glad he was reflecting on his life, and left. I didn't come back after he was discharged, and he didn't ask. People sometimes ask me if I regret how things ended with my family. It's not a simple answer. I regret that my parents couldn't love us equally. I regret that Lily was raised in a way that stunted her ability to function independently. I regret the years I spent feeling like I didn't measure up. But I don't regret walking away. I don't regret building my own life, my own sense of purpose, my own definition of family. One made up of friends who show up for me regardless of what's in my bank account. I don't regret that Thanksgiving explosion, because it pulled everything into the open and freed me from pretending. Lily eventually got sober, finished her therapy, and found a real job in marketing. She's doing better now, according to Diane, who still keeps me in the loop about family stuff. My parents are older, facing mortality, and wrestling with the fallout of their choices. My mom volunteers at a family counseling center, which Diane says is her way of trying to make amends for her own failings. As for me, I'm still in Austin. I started my own company focused on building software for nonprofits and social service networks. I travel when I want, give generously to causes I care about, and surround myself with people who value me for who I am. I have a partner now, someone who knew me long before they learned anything about the money, someone who loves the person I became because of everything I endured. Among my friends, that Thanksgiving story has turned into a kind of legend. The time my sister had a full-blown meltdown because the other daughter ended up succeeding. But to me, it isn't about the drama. It's about that moment when I finally stopped waiting for my family to see my worth. Deep down, I'd always known it. I just had to stop caring whether they ever figured it out. Sometimes the best revenge isn't something you plan. Sometimes it's just living well, succeeding on your own terms, and refusing to let the people who underestimated you have any power over your happiness. And the look on Lily's face when she realized I'd achieved everything she thought the world owed her. Well, that wasn't why I worked so hard, but I won't pretend it wasn't satisfying. I built my life from nothing while she waited for hers to be handed to her. And when the truth finally came out over turkey and stuffing, with the whole family sitting there in disbelief, I walked away knowing I did it all myself. No inheritance, no family connections, just determination, smart decisions, and the resilience you build when you learn early on that you're the only one you can count on. That's the real story. Not the money, not the breakdown, not the big confrontation. The real story is about a girl who was told she didn't matter, and who decided that the only opinion that truly mattered was her own. And in the end, that changed everything.